Happy generic time of the day, product people. Alan Neal here for the PDM Show, at the PDM Show on Twitter and Facebook, pdm.show on the web. Want to talk on this CarCast about pricing. Little selfish here. I'm mentoring a junior product manager right now, and pricing is one of the specific areas that of interest for them. So we've been looking at that topic, and it's kind of interesting, to get into the basics and the fundamentals. I talked to my mentee, and I shared a book that I have called The Strategy and Tactics of Pricing. And I know that the two fundamental models that most people are familiar with are cost-based pricing and value-based pricing. It's kind of like the difference between bottom-up planning and top-down planning. Cost-based pricing, you basically set your price by first calculating your cost of goods sold, if you will, or for each individual unit of whatever it is. In our case, most of the time, I'm working in enterprise B2B software. Most of the people who are going to be listening to this or watching it are probably in the software space as well. So, you would calculate what's the cost for you to serve. Let's say, if you're a SaaS-based product, for you to serve your SaaS-based product, let's say to one customer for one billing period, which might be a month. So what's your cost to serve to do that? And then you take that cost to serve, the total cost of goods sold, so everything, right? Factor in 1 month of however much support resource your customer is going to take, et cetera, and then on top of that, add whatever the margin is, the margin of return that your CFO needs to make for every dollar that they spend. So, for example, if you're in a situation where you need to make an 80% margin for your on every dollar that you spend in your organization, then you're going to take your total cost of goods sold, and you're gonna say, okay, that can only represent 20% of my overall price, because I need the other percent for margin. So the customer is going to have to pay for that cost of goods sold plus an 80% margin, and therefore the business gets in 100% in terms of the price that you're charging the customer. Only 20% of that is your cost to deliver your product, and that's cost-based pricing. Value-based pricing comes at it the other way. Value-based pricing says, I'm going to try to calculate and figure out what the value of my product or service is to the customer, and that's that might not be the price that I set or that I charge, but that'll be at least a reference point for what I will charge. So a lot of enterprise B2B software companies, for example, will say, listen, we're going to solve $1 million problem for our customer. In other words, our product or service is going to save our customer $1 million, let's say over the course of a year. But we're not going to charge them $1 million. We're not going to charge them $1 million for our product. We're going to charge them $200,000, and then therefore we're going to use the fact that we're giving them a 5x return on their investment, or at least a 4x. You guys can do the math for me, but we're going to give them a significant lift themselves, a return on their investment, because the customer needs some sense of a return. So we're talking about basic concepts like that. But then we got into examples, trying to use examples in our own personal day-to-day lives, and those two models don't really cut it in terms of trying to explain prices in your own day-to-day life. So, for example, my mentee and I often meet at a coffee shop that happens to be a Tim Hortons coffee shop, and I talked about the fact that I often buy coffee at Starbucks, which is obviously a competitor to Tim Hortons, and the coffee at Starbucks can be much more expensive. For a latte, for example, at Starbucks, could I think be around 1.5 or 2 times the price that's charged at Tim Hortons. So the question then becomes, now not as the pricer, but as the customer, how do you justify the cost of that Starbucks latte? And it's hard to justify even in terms of value, because you're asking yourself, am I getting, let's say, a venti, which is the largest size in Starbucks language. Let's say a venti latte is $5. How do you, as a customer, determine whether that latte is giving you $5 worth of value, $5 worth of benefit, or could you be satisfied with a $3 latte or a $2 latte, or a different price? So that we found that interesting, anyways, and I'd love if people can comment on here. The where that led us to was this notion that the optimal price, certainly from the seller, or from the vendor's perspective, in this case Starbucks, the optimal price to charge is the maximum price that the customer is willing to pay. So that got us into talking about price sensitivity, and how sensitive you would be to different price levels or price increases. If we look at that historically, the price of a lot of goods that we consume day to day has gone up by very large margins, and margins that can't just be explained by the increasing cost of the raw materials or the goods that go into those items. So so I found myself, anyways, as a product manager, a little bit perplexed in terms of saying, how do I put a value? And I don't think, the answer I come to, and I'd love to hear some feedback on this, is I don't really think about it. And I'd like to hear from pricing specialists out there how that factors into the model. Like I pay the $5 for the latte because I started drinking Starbucks coffee. I like it. I prefer the flavor. I've gotten used to it. I prefer the flavor over alternatives. So I'm likely to just go in there and pay whatever they're paying, and unless, I don't know, it doubled, or unless I don't have a job or whatever, I'll just pay that, and I won't think too much about it. So I'm interested to hear from pricing professionals out there. How is value-based pricing and cost-based pricing, are those the two predominant models? Is there another model for pricing out there that explains this concept of I don't even think about the value. I just pay what it is. I'll give you another quick example. I got my oil changed on my car this week, and the guy at the Mr. Lube says, well, you need it to change your air filter as well. And the guy's asking me, well, do you want to know what it cost? And I said no. And my mentee was kind of surprised that I wouldn't even inquire as to the cost, but my point was, I was generally aware of what the cost of that would be. I was fairly sure that I was not going to undergo the the hassle and inconvenience of getting the oil change while I was there, and then having to go to another place and make another appointment to get the air cleaner the air filter changed, or for that matter go to a store like Canadian Tire and buy buy the air filter part and then install that myself. I knew I wasn't interested in those options. So really, in the context of I'm already there, they've already got my car up on the hoist, they've already got the oil changed, what do I really care what the price is? Because it's not going to change my behavior. I'm still going to go ahead and pay for that, because the cost and inconvenience of the alternatives, I just don't want to go there. Right? I don't even want to think about it. So, So anyway, basically, the general idea I'd like some feedback on here is there's this unconscious level, excuse me, that maybe needs to be in the model, which is maybe our customers just pay the price because that's the price, and they don't even think about it that much, and they don't want to think about it that much. And if that's the case, then how do you figure out what that level of unconsciousness, how far that goes? In other words, if that Mr. Lube guy had then charged me $80 for that air filter, would that have caused me pause? Would I have looked at my bill and refused to pay for it? If the air filter had been $60, would that be the same situation? If it was $40, it turned out it was like $10 or $11. But my point is, as product pricers, how do we determine what that level of price sensitivity is that would cause me as a consumer to kind of wake from my unconscious slumber in not even thinking about it, and cause me to actually get engaged and say, okay, wait a second, now I am concerned about the price. How do you do that? So if there's any product pricing professionals out there, selfishly love to hear your feedback on this. I know this is a topic of great interest to my mentee right now. I've certainly done product pricing models and whatnot in my career, but I'm by no means a specialist in the domain. So really love to hear from folks, especially around this concept of kind of unconscious, I'll just pay whatever the price is that that the provider gives me without even thinking about it, and how do we factor that into our models? Alan Neal, PDM Show, at the PDM Show on Facebook and Twitter, pdm.show on the web, and we'll talk to you next time.